You might say my backhand is very good, but that's because I rarely initiate my own power on that side. A good shot is one with a high success rate that consistently scores points. The key elements of table tennis are speed, power, spin, placement, and variation. Of these five, which do you think is the most important? Guess what my top three are? In my opinion, the most crucial element is spin. If you ever play against me, you'll feel how heavy the spin on my ball is. The spin is likely far greater than you imagine. Whether it's serving, receiving, looping, pushing, ripping or flicking, my primary focus is always on generating maximum spin. The second element I prioritize is variation. I believe table tennis is a highly intelligent sport. Even if an opponent is physically stronger, you can win through strategy and tactics. Especially in amateur best-of-3 matches, your opponent might lose before they've even adapted to your game. So, the second key is definitely variation. My variation is multifaceted. For instance, having the ability to both high loop and power loop against backspin is a form of variation. Being able to punch block and fast loop is also variation. Using a side spin push, a chop block, or a short push are all types of variation. Being able to block, counterdrive, or flat hit is also variation. In short, it means having a rich arsenal of shots. This keeps your opponent guessing about the rhythm and placement of your returns. The third most important element for me is speed. Does the quality of a shot come entirely from power? Not necessarily. As female players, trying to hit with maximum force often leads to many errors. However, we can play like this, and the ball speed is still fast. So, the speed I generate often doesn't come from how much force I use. As you can see, I don't have much physical strength. But you can create threats through variations in the ball, using a mix of speed and spin. For example, you need the ability to accelerate your push, your loop, your rip, and your block. When you can accelerate the ball, you'll find your opponent is always half a step too slow. Therefore, in my view, these three are the most important. After them come placement and power, with power being the last priority. Let's talk about power. Everyone has 100% strength. Let me demonstrate. If I use all my power, I can loop the ball all the way to the wall. The most effective approach is to control this power and ensure the ball lands on the table. For this shot, I'll choose to use 70% of my power. If the next ball is more difficult and jams me, I might only use 30% of my power to return it. If you can choose the correct way to return every single ball, you'll be a world champion. If you make the right choice most of the time, you're an advanced player. If you make more wrong choices, you'll be the one losing the match. And if nearly all your choices are wrong, you're a beginner. It's a process everyone goes through. The idea that speed and power are directly proportional isn't always true. Sometimes a fast ball has very little power. For example, if I execute a backhand down the line, this shot has power. But this one is about speed, not necessarily great power. You can use power, but controlling that power is the area amateur players should focus on most right now. Power generation comes in two main forms. The first is active power, created by meeting the ball's force with your own, which we call combined force. This is the most advanced form of power in table tennis. This combined force is created when the ball is moving away from the table, and you are moving forward into it. The best timing for this combined force is right after the ball bounces, as it's moving back and you are moving forward. So, when is it appropriate to use this type of impact, and how much force should you apply? Let me share my experience. There's no absolute standard, as every player's feel is different. A normal return, for example, in a forehand or backhand drive rally, looks like this. For any normal paced return or any ball that comes with less pace, like a simple block from your opponent, you can use 70% or more of your power. For example, a ball like this. This 70% isn't just arm power, it's the total power from your body and arm combined. If you use less body, use more arm. If you use more body, use less arm. Using 70, 80, or 90% is fine, but never go 100%. Pushing anything to its absolute limit is counterproductive. Going to extremes can lead to unforced errors or injuries. If your opponent initiates an attack, Their shot quality comes not just from power, but also from speed or spin. Let's demonstrate this for everyone. For instance, here's a normal rally. But when your opponent suddenly accelerates, adds heavy spin, or hits with more power. Against these types of returns, you must not use an active, power-generating motion. Do not create space between yourself and the ball. Whenever your opponent adds speed, spin, or power, this applies to both topspin and backspin balls. For instance, against a standard push, I can use 70% or more power in my loop. But if he accelerates his push, trying to loop with 70% power will very likely result in an error. If he adds heavy backspin, using 70% power will cause the ball to go straight into the net. So, against a high-quality return, first, avoid creating too much space for a backswing. Second, you must adjust the amount of force from your hand. Do not use more than 70% power, you need to reduce it. If the opponent's return is of normal quality, meaning same speed as your rally drill, a passive block, or a slow, high, or misplaced ball due to footwork issues, you can use your space to generate active power. Let me demonstrate. Active power generation requires creating space for your swing to achieve maximum force on impact, resulting in a winning shot the opponent cannot defend. The second key concept is borrowing power. What does this mean? When I loop this ball, this is an example of borrowing power. I stay close to the ball and apply force only after making contact. Demonstrating, this is active power. This is borrowing power. Active power. Borrowing power. You can think of borrowing power as first absorbing the opponent's pace and then applying your own force through the second half of the stroke. So, when is borrowing power most commonly used? For example, when I serve and my opponent pushes the ball back very fast. I use borrowing power most often during serve-receive. It's an essential skill for that part of the game. When the incoming ball is fast, amateur players often make a mistake, then resort to pushing, which makes them vulnerable to attack. What's the solution? Don't take a full backswing. Use the opponent's pace and apply your power late in the stroke. The high quality of my return doesn't come from a full motion, but from not getting jammed by the pace and having a very compact, powerful finish. Borrowing power is most frequently used during all types of serve-receive, against topspin, backspin, short, half-long, or fast serves, and allows you to return with high quality. The second common scenario is during a rally, especially when your opponent is hitting with force. If I tried to use active power on every shot, I might make an error after 2 strokes. But by borrowing power, we can rally for countless shots. The quality of this rally is already very high, and this is achieved by borrowing power. You might say my backhand is very good, but that's because I rarely initiate my own power on that side. Many players think a good shot is one powerful loop that the opponent can't return. That's incorrect. A good shot is one with a high success rate that consistently scores points. Why is my backhand so consistent? The power you see is almost entirely borrowed from my opponent's shot. If my opponent just blocks the ball softly, I can't generate much power. Knowing when to correctly use these two types of power generation is crucial. Okay, let's play a point, and you can observe how many times I use active power generation. How many of those shots were active power? None. All of those shots used borrowed power. So what does active power look like? Let me demonstrate. This is active power generation. As you can see, professional players very rarely use full active power during a match. For example, if I serve short to your forehand and you return it half-long, is this active power or borrowed power? Let me demonstrate again. This is also an example of borrowing power. Because the ball is too close to me, there's no space to take a big swing. Anyone who tries will make an error. Let's try another scenario. I'll serve sidespin backspin and we'll rally. Watch my strokes. First I block, then I attack. Block, then attack. Block, then attack. This is variation. It's about choosing the right shot for the right ball. Even though my first shot was a block, it doesn't mean I'm at a disadvantage, because his return wasn't of the highest quality. Don't think you must attack every ball. You need the ability to stay in the rally and wait for the right opportunity to play a winning shot. The rhythm and spin of a soft block on the first ball are different from a soft shot in the middle of a rally. When an opponent loops, you don't know exactly how much spin is on the ball, making it difficult to judge. For instance, people might look at my loop and think it's not very spinny, but it's actually extremely spinny. You can't accurately judge an opponent's spin. In this situation, the best tactic is to play a safe return first and then look for an opportunity to attack with power. That's the key. The only time you should increase the quality on your first attack is when you know you can't win the rally. This is called an all-out attack or a gambling shot. I would rarely choose to attack the first ball with full power. My choice would be to change the placement first. Changing placement, rhythm, and adding spin are all very sound tactical choices. Some of you might ask, then why do you teach us to have a full backswing? A full backswing is for the shot that you absolutely must win the point with. For instance, if I serve to his forehand and he pushes long to my forehand, if that return is not high quality, of course you should open up and attack it with full power. If the opponent's push is very heavy and fast, of course I won't take a big backswing. You need to have this adaptability. However, if you can't take a proper backswing, you won't be able to generate active power, and you'll lack a kill shot, which is also a problem. As your serve improves, the probability of receiving a low-quality return from your opponent increases. If you always serve with low quality, you will never get an opportunity to attack. If you serve with high quality, the opponent's return will likely be of lower quality. Whenever the return is slow or high, you can use a full backswing to generate active power. This isn't for rallying, it's for a one-shot finish to win the point.